Before we begin, do you have a theory about this case or a story of your own? Leave a message on our socials. Our handles are all just Nightwatch Files without the space, or head over to nightwatchfiles.com to find them all in one place. Your insights might be featured in a future episode. I'm Harper Finley, and this is Nightwatch Files. Quick note, if you enjoy the show and want to support it continuing, we have a Patreon that goes for just $3 a month, which is less than a coffee. You'll get ad-free access to every episode, and your support helps us add more perks in the future. Whether you want to help keep the show going or just prefer listening without ads, you can find the link in the episode description. Every supporter makes a real difference. Now, let's get into today's case. At 5:36 p.m. on January 11th, 1999, a 911 call came into Harris County Emergency Services. Somebody's broken into my house, and my wife has been shot. The caller's voice was breaking with emotion. Oh my God, oh Jesus, her brain is on the floor. I think she's already dead. The man on the phone was David Temple, a 30-year-old high school football coach from Katy, Texas. His wife Belinda, 8 months pregnant with their second child, had been found shot in the head in their family home. When police arrived at 22502 Round Valley Drive, they found David Temple standing outside his home, devastated. Inside, they discovered a scene that appeared to tell a tragic but clear story. The back door window was shattered. Drawers had been pulled open. A television lay on the floor. And in a bedroom closet, 30-year-old Belinda Temple lay dead from a shotgun blast to the head, her unborn daughter Erin dying with her. It looked like a burglary gone horribly wrong. A pregnant woman who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time when an intruder broke into her home. For David Temple, it was every husband's worst nightmare. He had returned home with his 3-year-old son Evan to find his wife murdered and his family destroyed. David was much more than just a grieving widower. He was Katy royalty. A former star linebacker who had helped bring the town its first district championship in over 2 decades, he was known throughout the community as the Temple of Doom for his fierce playing style. Now a respected high school football coach carrying on the family tradition of excellence, David represented everything the football-obsessed town valued: toughness, dedication, and hometown pride. The community of Katy, Texas, rallied around their fallen hero. The investigation began immediately, with detectives working to find whoever had committed this senseless crime. But this case would not unfold the way anyone expected, and 6 years later, the question wouldn't be who killed Belinda Temple. It would be why it had taken so long to uncover the truth. Thomas Tom Eaton Lucas met Carol Maxine Morrison when he was working as an assistant manager at a dime store, and she was a credit manager at a nearby dress shop. Tom, originally from West Virginia, and Carol, from Port Huron, Michigan, married on July 22, 1962, and settled in Martins Ferry, Ohio, where Tom found work in a steel mill. By 1968, the couple already had 3 sons, Brian, Barry, and Brent. When Carol became pregnant again, they expected to welcome 1 baby girl to complete their family. However, on December 30th, 1968, they received an unexpected surprise. In an era before routine ultrasounds, the birth of twins came as a complete shock. Brenda Therese was born first, weighing 8 pounds, 1 ounce. 8 minutes later, Belinda Tracy entered the world at 6 pounds, 1 ounce. Tom was so overjoyed at having 2 daughters that he whooped and hollered at the news. As the last of 5 children, Belinda would later give herself the nickname Number 5. Her 5-year-old brother Brian struggled to pronounce her name and called her Katy Doo-Doo. Though Carol sewed matching dresses for the girls, the fraternal twins quickly showed their distinct personalities. Belinda, despite being smaller at birth, soon grew to be the larger twin, developing an athletic build with curly light brown hair and impish green eyes. She overflowed with energy and always wanted to be first in line, earning a reputation for having spunk and being in the middle of everything. While other girls played with dolls, Belinda preferred climbing trees with her brothers. She was a natural leader who learned to ride a bike before her twin and then taught Brenda how to do the same. She also taught Brenda how to tie her shoes. Despite being younger by 8 minutes, she took on a motherly role, and if something needed to be done, Belinda was the one to do it. She affectionately called her older twin Shrimpy, a nickname that would stick for life. From an early age, Belinda demonstrated fierce protectiveness toward her family. When she learned that her brother Barry was deaf, she taught herself sign language to communicate with him. If other children made fun of Barry, Belinda would confront them, regardless of their size. She showed the same protective instinct toward Brenda, never allowing anyone to pick on her twin sister. In the mid-1970s, after Tom suffered an accident at the steel mill, the Lucas family relocated to Nacogdoches, Texas, the state's oldest town. They moved to be closer to relatives and seek better opportunities. However, this period brought new family tensions. Some relatives felt that Tom became more demanding after the move, and Belinda would later confide to friends that she found her father overwhelming and, at times, suffocating. Despite these family challenges, both twins threw themselves into school activities. They joined the Future Farmers of America, where Belinda approached her responsibilities with characteristic dedication. She raised chickens and worked with steers, and her conscientious efforts paid off when her broiler won grand champion at the Piney Woods Fair, earning her $2,100 for college. Sports became Belinda's true passion, particularly basketball. She wasn't a natural athlete, but she transformed herself into a standout player through relentless hard work. She spent summers lifting weights and running, determined to excel through effort rather than raw talent. Even after leaving the cheerleading squad to focus entirely on basketball, she continued leading cheers at pep rallies, demonstrating her unwavering team spirit. By her senior year at Nacogdoches High School in 1987, Belinda had become a beloved figure on campus. Her classmates voted her most school spirit, and her basketball team achieved all-district status. Those who knew her described her as being so in love with life, she just radiated happiness. Initially considering nursing as a career path, Belinda eventually decided she wanted to become a teacher and coach for special needs children, inspired by her experiences with her deaf brother Barry. However, above all career aspirations, family remained paramount to Belinda. She told friends her ultimate goal was to find the right husband and raise a team of little athletes. After graduating high school, Belinda enrolled at Angelina College in nearby Lufkin while living at home. The arrangement quickly became a source of conflict as she clashed with her father over his strict rules and curfews. Determined to experience the freedom of a typical college student, she took a job at Brookshire Brothers grocery store and became an aerobics instructor to pay for school and gain independence. Eventually, she moved into an apartment with her friend Stacy Rios and another roommate. During this time, Belinda became engaged to a high school boyfriend. However, when she discovered he had been unfaithful, she ended the relationship without hesitation. As her family and friends would later recall, once trust was broken, Belinda was not the type to hold on to a dying relationship. The following year, she transferred to Stephen F. Austin University to pursue her teaching degree, majoring in physical education and special education. Belinda proved herself a remarkably hard worker, juggling 3 jobs at the grocery store, the gym, and the SFA farm, while maintaining her class schedule. At 19, Belinda embraced her newfound independence and enjoyed being single in college. She and Stacy would go out dancing at local clubs after work. Those who knew her during this time described her as beautiful, with a perfectly toned body, sparkling green eyes, and an infectious charisma. As one friend noted, you couldn't be around Belinda and not feel good. She dated casually, including a brief relationship with a fellow worker from the grocery store, but nothing serious developed. She also became a little sister for the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity, further expanding her social circle. Despite her active social life, Belinda remained laser-focused on her educational and career goals, not actively seeking a serious romantic relationship at this stage of her life. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. The Temple family had deep roots in Katy, Texas, with David's maternal lineage tracing back to the late 1800s. His mother, Maureen Evans, came from a family that lived on lots carved out of her Uncle Albert's rice fields along Katy-Hockley Road. His father, Ken Temple, was born in Louisiana, worked in computers, and served as an ordained Baptist minister. David Mark Temple was born on July 19, 1968, the middle of 3 sons. His older brother, Darren, had been born in 1965, and his younger brother, Kevin, would follow in 1971. The Temple family was well known throughout the community and at the First Baptist Church of Katy. They were described as a close-knit, salt-of-the-earth family that valued appearances and refused to air their dirty laundry. Every Sunday, the extended family would gather for coffee at one of the family homes, maintaining their tight bonds. Growing up, the Temple brothers spent considerable time dove hunting in the rice fields behind their home. Their maternal grandfather, a Houston police officer, taught them to shoot, and their parents bought them shotguns for Christmas, establishing an early familiarity with firearms. From a young age, David was treated as special by his parents. He became the family entertainer, a charmer who loved making people laugh. However, a family cousin observed that his parents rarely held him accountable for his actions, making him seem untouchable. When someone accused David of wrongdoing, his parents would simply ask David directly, and if he denied it, they considered the matter closed. This lack of accountability became apparent to those who knew David well. Friends and classmates described him as having a dual personality. While he could be funny and charismatic, there was absolutely a dark side. This darker aspect manifested as egotistical behavior, coupled with a bad temper that made other children walk on pins and needles around him. He was known to fight battles for his friends within his elite circle of jocks, but many classmates outside this group considered him a bully. The severity of David's temperament became evident in a disturbing incident involving his older brother Darren. Family cousin Cindy Thompson recalled Darren arriving at her house, shaking and visibly upset. During an argument, David had grabbed a shotgun and held it directly in Darren's face, backing him into a corner while their mother begged David to put the weapon down. Darren described David's demeanor during the confrontation as having changed completely, with a blank look in his eyes. Football became central to David's identity and his family's status within Katy. He was a standout player from youth football onward, known for his toughness and fearlessness. At Katy High School, he played middle linebacker, wearing number 83, and was considered one of the meanest and most intense players his coach had ever encountered. In 1986, his team won the district championship for the first time in 22 years, establishing David as a hometown hero. During his sophomore year, David suffered a severe knee injury requiring 2 surgeries. He rehabilitated with intense determination and returned to the field stronger than before. Around this time, rumors began circulating that he was using anabolic steroids. A fellow player later claimed that his steroid supplier also sold to David. David's behavior toward romantic relationships revealed his capacity for cruelty. In high school, he dated a girl named Hillary Brooks, but was unfaithful with another girl. When Hillary ended the relationship, David was seen crying, a rare display of vulnerability. However, his emotional response quickly turned vindictive. He began jeering at Hillary, calling her horsehead, and encouraging others to join in the harassment. A classmate later informed Hillary that David had wrung the necks of her pet rabbits. In February 1987, David's behavior escalated to criminal activity when he was arrested for a series of car burglaries targeting radar detectors. His accomplice told police that the money was intended for purchasing steroids. David ultimately pleaded guilty to a single misdemeanor charge of attempted burglary and received a sentence of 3 days in jail and a $100 fine. Despite his success on the high school football field, David faced disappointment during college recruitment. Major universities, including the University of Oklahoma, lost interest after evaluating him in person. At 5 feet, 11 inches, he was deemed too short to be an effective linebacker at the top collegiate level. This rejection was a significant blow to his aspirations. He ultimately accepted a 5-year scholarship to Stephen F. Austin University. At SFA, David continued his football career with the Lumberjacks, earning the nickname Temple of Doom for his fierce playing style. In 1989, his team achieved a milestone by winning the Southland Conference title for the first time. The following year, David was featured on the cover of the team's football guide, cementing his status as a standout player. However, his aggressive behavior extended well beyond the football field. David frequently engaged in bar fights, and his teammates noted his hair-trigger temper. They learned to be careful not to provoke him, understanding the potential consequences. In one incident, he allegedly attacked a bowling alley attendant who had simply informed him that the facility was closing. During his second year at SFA, David met Pam Engelkirk, an elementary education major, and they began a serious relationship. Initially, he was charming and affectionate, and Pam became very close with his family. However, the relationship was marked by David's increasing jealousy and need for control. As the relationship progressed, David's violent tendencies began to surface during arguments. He would punch walls and kick Pam's car door when angry. The relationship reached a terrifying climax during an incident at a Dallas hotel room in January 1990. Following an argument, David burst into Pam's room and chased her into the bathroom. He screamed at her and pushed her against the wall as she cried out in fear. Despite the severity of this assault, Pam ultimately forgave him and remained in the relationship. In November 1990, David's girlfriend Pam Engelkirk called in sick to her job at the Californian restaurant. Later that evening, a friend contacted Pam with troubling news. David had been seen at the restaurant's lounge, slow dancing with another woman. That woman was Belinda Lucas. At the time, Belinda was in her 3rd year at Stephen F. Austin University and thriving in every aspect of her life. She remained focused on her studies to become a special education teacher and coach, juggled multiple jobs to support herself, and was content being single. She was not actively seeking a serious relationship. The following day, Pam confronted David about what she had witnessed. In response, David broke down crying, dropped to his knees, and professed his undying love for her. While Pam was still at his apartment processing this emotional display, Belinda unexpectedly arrived. She looked at both David and Pam, asked for one of David's roommates, and then left without further comment. Despite his tearful proclamation of love, David called Pam the next evening with a different message. He told her he needed a break from their relationship, effectively ending their 2-year romance. 2 nights later, a mutual friend spotted David out dancing with Belinda. His roommate, Reno Moore, observed that once David and Belinda became involved, he immediately broke up with Pam. From that point forward, David was rarely seen without Belinda by his side. To David's teammates and friends, the new couple appeared to be a natural fit. Both were accomplished athletes who shared a genuine love of sports. As he had been initially with Pam, David was affectionate and gentle with Belinda during the early stages of their relationship. Belinda's friend Stacy Rios recalled that David treated her like a princess. While Stacy personally disliked David, finding him cruel and egotistical, she admitted that he behaved as a gentleman around Belinda. However, those closest to Belinda quickly noticed a significant change in her personality. The strong, feisty woman they knew began to transform in David's presence. Stacy observed that around David, Belinda became noticeably less opinionated and self-assured. When David became angry, he would fall silent and simply stare at Belinda. In response, she would back down and comply with whatever he wanted, behavior that was completely uncharacteristic of the confident woman her friends knew. Belinda's twin sister Brenda noticed similar changes. She observed that Belinda consistently took a back seat to David in their relationship. Whenever he disagreed with her, Belinda would go silent rather than defend her position. Brenda sensed that for Belinda to maintain her relationship with David, everything had to be his way. The Temple family, however, viewed Belinda's influence on David in an entirely different light. They felt she had a positive effect on him, making him more mature and helping to tame his wild tendencies. Ken and Maureen Temple believed Belinda brought out the good in him and that their son was finally growing up. Ken and Maureen first met Belinda at a Stephen F. Austin football game. Ken was immediately captivated, later saying he saw her hair and green eyes dancing in the sun. The Temples quickly adopted the nickname B for Belinda and showed no regret about David's breakup with Pam. They embraced Belinda from the start, and she easily integrated into their family dynamic. She shared their interest in visiting flea markets and faithfully attended all their family gatherings. The reception from Belinda's family proved more mixed. Tom Lucas was initially impressed with David, who had achieved local hero status as a Nacogdoches football star. However, other family members harbored reservations. Belinda's uncle, Chuck Lucas, felt that David never seemed to fit into the family and noted his lack of affection toward the Lucas relatives. Brenda was struck by how every conversation with David inevitably centered on football. Most troubling, Stacy Rios overheard David referring to the Lucas family as rednecks and white trash when speaking behind their backs. In the fall of 1991, David and Belinda acquired a chow puppy they named Shaka. The dog grew into an extremely protective animal that would growl at anyone who approached either David or Belinda. David's capacity for violence surfaced again in March 1991 during a co-ed intramural basketball game. When an opposing player named Eric Buck said "good call" to a referee after a foul was called on David, David's response was swift and brutal. Seconds later, he clubbed Buck on the head from behind, knocking him unconscious. David agreed to pay Buck's medical expenses, and no criminal charges were filed. The fall of 1991 marked David's final football season with the Lumberjacks. He was featured in the team's television commercials and received honorable mention recognition as an All-American linebacker. During this period, he also made the decision to pursue coaching rather than attempt a professional football career. In November 1991, David took the traditional step of visiting Tom and Carol Lucas to formally request their permission to marry their daughter, a gesture that impressed Belinda's parents. The proposal itself took place in October after a football game and was characteristically theatrical. David walked Belinda out to the 50-yard line of the football field, where friends had positioned their cars in a circle and turned on their headlights to illuminate the scene. He then dropped to one knee and presented her with a diamond ring. Their engagement was officially announced in the local newspaper on November 3, 1991. That winter, David's college football career concluded with him holding 3 all-time Lumberjack records for tackles, cementing his legacy at Stephen F. Austin University. After graduating from Stephen F. Austin University in May 1992 with degrees in physical education, David and Belinda decided to remain in Nacogdoches for an additional year to pursue master's degrees in education. They moved into SFA's married student housing and began their graduate studies together. During this period, concerning patterns began to emerge in their relationship dynamics. Belinda confided in her twin sister Brenda that David was struggling with his graduate school papers. She revealed that she was completing most of his academic work while he was occupied with coaching responsibilities. Their relationship with Belinda's family also showed signs of strain. David and Belinda saw Tom and Carol Lucas infrequently during this time. After attending a small New Year's Eve party at the Lucas house, David never entered their home again. From that point forward, Belinda always visited her family alone. Other Lucas family members continued to harbor doubts about David. Belinda's uncle Chuck felt that David struggled to relax and never seemed to integrate well with their family dynamic. Her brother Brian went deer hunting with David and found him to be boastful, with David claiming he had once bagged his dove hunting limit using only a single box of shotgun shells. Despite these tensions, Belinda's desire to start a family remained evident. During a visit to her brother Barry when his son was born, she held the infant and spoke wistfully about wanting a baby of her own. In 1993, after Belinda completed her master's degree and David neared completion of his, they received a career opportunity. Don Clayton, one of David's former coaches from Katy High School, offered him a position as an assistant coach at Livingston High School. David and Belinda relocated to the nearby town of Goodrich, where they rented a home that Belinda furnished with flea market antiques she personally refinished. David began his coaching career working with inside linebackers and track, while Belinda took a position as a special education teacher at a local middle school. However, signs of marital strain soon became apparent to those close to Belinda. She complained to friends that David was rarely home, particularly during football season, often not returning until well after dark. More troubling, she confided in her college roommate, Stacy Rios, that she wondered if David was having an affair. While she had no concrete evidence and quickly contradicted herself by saying he was simply busy with work, Stacy sensed that Belinda wouldn't admit David's faults even to herself. Belinda's family observed that she was determined to project a happy image of her marriage and home life, which prevented her from confiding in them about any problems she might have been experiencing. They rented a one-story beige brick house on Comstock Springs Drive, just 15 minutes from where David had grown up. The couple began attending First Baptist Church with David's parents and participated in the regular Sunday afternoon temple family gatherings. A family member would later recall that they seemed happy initially, but noted that over time, that changed. In late 1994, Belinda discovered she was pregnant. Both she and David were delighted about the coming baby, deciding to name their son Evan after David's maternal grandfather. They worked together in the garage, sanding and refinishing flea market furniture to prepare the nursery. On the evening of April 13, 1995, Belinda went into labor. David was not home at the time, so his parents transported her to the hospital. He arrived an hour later. Evan Brett Temple was born at 2 a.m. The proud parents sent out a birth announcement referring to their son as their first draft pick and little linebacker. Belinda was overjoyed and excited about motherhood. She sent photographs of the new baby to her brother Brian and his wife Jill, inviting them to visit. However, the dynamics within the household began to shift in concerning ways. When Brenda visited, she observed that while Belinda appeared happy with the baby, David behaved oddly and kept his distance, making Brenda feel unwelcome in their home. More troubling, Belinda began confiding in neighbors about problems in her marriage. She told Jackie Saram that David did not want her or Evan to be around her family. She shared the same concern with another neighbor, Cherie Fornerat, who noticed that Belinda's affection for the Temple family was waning. She had begun referring to David's mother as Mother Temple, in a tone that wasn't always affectionate. David's controlling behavior became increasingly apparent to those around them. Belinda began inline skating with Evan's stroller to regain her pre-pregnancy fitness, confiding in Cherie that David doesn't like heavy women. Neighbor Jackie Sarami witnessed David yelling at Belinda from inside the house, ordering her to come inside when she was on the driveway or in the garage. Belinda would immediately comply without argument. Cherie heard David mock Belinda and observed the cold, stern look in David's eyes that left Belinda visibly furious but silent. The family dog Shaka had become well known in the neighborhood for aggressive behavior. One afternoon, the dog attacked a neighbor's friendly lab mix while David stood by and watched. He only intervened to pull Shaka away after neighbors shouted at him to act. During the Christmas break, David attended a coaching camp, leaving Belinda and Evan at home. She used his absence as an opportunity to drive to Nacogdoches and spend one night with her parents and Evan. This was a rare visit, as her contact with her family had become increasingly infrequent. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, The ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. In the spring of 1996, Belinda left her position in the Alif School District and was hired as a content mastery teacher at Katy High School, David's alma mater. The teachers who interviewed her were blown away by her energy and confidence that the students would love her. Despite knowing David as a bully with a bad reputation during his high school years, they hired her, assuming he had matured since then. Belinda quickly established herself as a beloved faculty member, becoming known for her enthusiasm at pep rallies, her daily motivational emails as head of the Sunshine Club, and her role as the unofficial Four Corners lady, directing students through the hallways. During the summer of 1996, David and Belinda met another young coaching couple, Quentin and Tammy Harlan. The two families quickly developed a close friendship, sharing regular dinners, taking their children to the park together, and playing cards on weekends. However, Tammy Harlan soon began to observe troubling aspects of David's personality. He insisted on planning every detail of their social gatherings, demanded that their house remain spotless, and required that both he and Evan wear only matching, name-brand clothing. David frequently complained about his 1991 Chevrolet pickup truck and expressed his desire for a new vehicle, but Belinda would remind him they were saving money to purchase their first home. More concerning was David's continued disparagement of Belinda's family. Tammy heard him refer to the Lucas family as fat rednecks and white trash behind Belinda's back. During the holiday season, Belinda complained to Tammy that David would not permit her to take Evan to visit her parents. In November 1996, after their landlord refused to sell them their rental property, David and Belinda purchased a larger, two-story red brick colonial home at 22502 Round Valley Drive in the Creekstone subdivision. Needing assistance with the down payment, Belinda borrowed money from her twin sister Brenda, which they quickly repaid. Belinda was thrilled with their new home and enthusiastically decorated it, paying particular attention to Evan's bedroom. By the spring of 1997, the cracks in David and Belinda's marriage had become more apparent to their closest friends. Tammy began hearing rumors from other coaches' wives that David was being unfaithful. When Tammy cautiously broached the subject, Belinda confided that she sometimes wondered if he was fooling around, but would quickly dismiss her own suspicions. David's aggressive behavior continued to manifest in various situations. He got into a physical confrontation with Quentin for attempting to leave a bar, ripping his shirt collar during the altercation. He also engaged in a prolonged conflict with another coach, Billy Kramer, whom he had been ridiculing for over a year. Their eventual fight was so intense that Quentin had to physically restrain David by jumping on his back. Kramer left the school district at the end of that year. During David's 10-year high school reunion that summer, his behavior toward Belinda became particularly humiliating. He attended a pre-party alone and openly flirted with an old girlfriend. The following night, Belinda accompanied him to the main reunion event and was left in tears, telling Tammy she felt humiliated watching him flirt with other women throughout the evening. That same summer marked the last time Belinda's brother Brian and his wife Jill would see her. David and Belinda were supposed to meet them for dinner, but stood them up, choosing instead to dine at the same restaurant with David's family. After this incident, Belinda stopped returning Brian's phone calls. David's emotional and verbal abuse of Belinda escalated during this period. Tammy witnessed him ridicule Belinda's weight, making comments about her big butt and unfavorably comparing her post-pregnancy body to how she had looked in college. He also began undermining her parenting, insisting that only he had the right to discipline Evan. Tammy observed Belinda becoming increasingly quiet and submissive, walking on eggshells around David. In August 1998, the new Hastings 9th grade center opened, and David and Quentin were transferred there, along with a new single English teacher named Heather Scott. Quentin began flirting with Heather, and David, being intensely competitive with his friend, was also drawn to her. David began attending Thursday night happy hours with other teachers while lying to Belinda that he was at junior varsity games. During these gatherings, he and Heather started pairing up, sitting by themselves and engaging in quiet, intimate conversations. The relationship quickly became physical. Heather's roommate, Tara Hall, began finding David's truck parked at their townhouse late on Friday nights. She would often discover them together upstairs in Heather's bedroom. David started bringing Heather gifts of flowers and perfume. The affair became an open secret among the faculty at the 9th grade center. David and Heather exchanged dozens of flirtatious emails during school hours, communications that would later be recovered by investigators. Meanwhile, Belinda's suspicions about David's infidelity were growing. In the spring of 1998, she discovered David's credit card receipts from bars and strip clubs. She was seen crying at her desk one morning by a fellow teacher, confiding about problems at home but begging him not to intervene, fearing it would only make it worse. Over the summer, the marital tension reached a breaking point. David and Belinda went for weeks without speaking to each other. She confided in Tammy that she had begun refusing to spend every weekend with David's family. The standoff only ended after David first told Belinda he didn't know if he loved her, then reversed himself the following night, claiming that he did. Shortly after their reconciliation, Belinda became pregnant with their second child. Initially, David appeared pleased with the news, and his parents were thrilled to learn the baby would be a girl. However, as the fall progressed and his affair with Heather intensified, David's enthusiasm about the baby disappeared entirely. Belinda confided in multiple friends that she was no longer certain David even wanted their daughter. December 1998 brought a series of troubling incidents that would prove to be the final month of Belinda's life. David forbade Brenda from visiting for Christmas, telling Belinda they would be too busy with his family's celebrations. David failed to purchase a Christmas gift for Belinda and began discussing getting a vasectomy, which deeply upset her. When Brenda finally arrived for a visit on December 27th, the tension in the household was palpable. David repeatedly made cruel remarks about Belinda's pregnancy weight, prompting her to confront him directly. "You're not happy about having this baby girl." On their shared 30th birthday, December 30th, David announced during dinner that he was going hunting on New Year's Eve and would be absent for 2 nights. Belinda appeared surprised by this sudden announcement. On New Year's Eve, David left the house, taking the family's only cell phone and providing no details about his destination or companions. He had lied to Belinda about his plans. Instead of hunting, he spent the next 2 days with Heather Scott at her townhouse, even bragging about his deception to other guests at her New Year's Eve party. He had kept his guns and hunting gear in his truck to maintain the deception should Belinda discover his true whereabouts. On New Year's Day, David and Heather spent a leisurely day lounging on her couch watching football before he spent another night in her bedroom. Over the entire 3-day period he was with Heather, David called Belinda only once, on Sunday afternoon as he was driving home. While David was with his mistress, Belinda was dealing with family obligations and her own emotional turmoil. On the morning of New Year's Day, she drove her twin sister Brenda and Evan to the airport for Brenda's early flight back to Kansas. Belinda appeared weary and depressed during this farewell, and Brenda experienced a strong premonition that she would never see her sister again. After dropping Brenda at the airport, Belinda returned home with Evan, where she spent the remainder of the day likely worrying about David's unexplained absence. On Sunday evening, January 3rd, David and Belinda took Evan to dinner at Los Cucos restaurant. Their meal was observed by fellow coach Bill Norwood and his wife Marianne, who were dining at the same establishment. Marianne thought Belinda looked incredibly sad and was struck by how the couple sat silently across from each other without speaking. When Belinda briefly joined the Norwoods' table, she spoke about saving her sick days to use after the baby was born. During the first week of school in January 1999, a disturbing rumor began circulating at Hastings High School. David Temple was allegedly telling people that his wife, Belinda, was the teacher responsible for reporting the rule violation that had disqualified the Katy High School football team from the state championship. This claim was entirely false, leading some to wonder if David's motive was to make people in the football-obsessed town really mad at Belinda. At Katy High School, teachers who encountered Belinda during this week thought she appeared well, though tired from her pregnancy. She continued her duties as normal, unaware of the false rumors her husband was spreading about her. On Friday, January 8th, David's relationship with Heather Scott reached a new level of intensity. He told Heather, "You know, I think I have fallen totally in love with you." Heather reciprocated, telling him she felt the same way. Saturday, January 9th, found Belinda still working to complete the nursery for baby Aaron. A primary source of frustration was a decorative shelf she wanted David to install, but he had not done the work. Earlier in the week, she had received a high estimate from a handyman and decided she would have to complete the installation herself. On Sunday, January 10th, Belinda drove to the Home Depot on Interstate 10 and purchased a set of replacement brackets for the shelf. These items would later be found in her Isuzu following her murder. That afternoon, her neighbor Natalie Scott observed Belinda in the garage, working on the shelves. Natalie was amazed that Belinda, so far along in her pregnancy, was still performing such physical labor. Belinda invited Natalie inside to see the nursery she had been preparing. When they entered the house, Natalie saw David sprawled on the couch watching television while his pregnant wife worked alone on the baby preparations. Belinda confided in Natalie that David had done little to help get ready for the baby's arrival, citing the uninstalled wall shelf as a prime example of his lack of involvement. Despite her obvious frustration with David's indifference, when Belinda spoke about Aaron's impending birth, she looked really happy and excited. Her love for her unborn daughter remained undimmed by her husband's neglect and the deteriorating state of their marriage. Monday, January 11th, 1999, began with chaos in the Temple household on Round Valley Drive. 3-year-old Evan had fallen ill during the night with a low-grade fever and had crawled into his parents' bed, sleeping between David and Belinda. Around 6 a.m., David's mother Maureen called to offer some homemade soup she had prepared. She suggested Belinda stop by after school to collect it. Despite feeling exhausted from the disrupted night, Belinda gave Evan Motrin for his fever. She made the difficult decision to send him to daycare anyway, as she was carefully saving her sick days for after the baby's birth. David left for his coaching position at Hastings 9th Grade Center before Belinda departed with Evan. At Tigerland Daycare, Belinda arrived with Evan riding on her back, prompting teacher Ida Sivley to joke, "Girl, you better put that boy down or you'll have that baby right now." Belinda laughed and replied, "No, he's my baby too." She informed Evan's teachers about his rough night and fever, asking them to call if his condition worsened. She mentioned that David had agreed to pick Evan up later so she could complete her workday. Belinda arrived at Katy High School just after 7 a.m. with noticeably swollen ankles. Her colleagues Debbie Berger and Cindy O'Brien brought her a chair to help with her discomfort. She spoke about Evan's illness and expressed guilt about sleeping through his distress during the night. When she mentioned having little appetite, Debbie joked that it might be a sign the baby was coming soon. Despite the morning's challenges, Belinda maintained her routine, sending out her daily motivational email to the staff. The message contained a joke about a boy whose mother could predict the future by looking at his report card. She signed it cheerfully, "Have a great Monday, Belinda." Around 11:40 a.m., Tigerland called the school to report that Evan's temperature had risen above 100.6 degrees and he needed to be collected immediately. Belinda was in the teacher's lunchroom when she received the notification. Returning to her classroom, She became increasingly frustrated as she tried repeatedly to reach David at Hastings, calling both his school phone and cell phone multiple times without success. "I can never find David when I need him," she complained to Debbie. "I ought to get him a beeper." She expressed concern to another colleague, Stacy Nisley, that she might end up missing the rest of her workday. Belinda left school, assuring an administrator she would return in time for a 2 p.m. parent conference. At Tigerland, she encountered another pregnant teacher, Eileen Lang, and they compared baby bumps while Belinda said, "Aaron will be here any day now." Evan's teacher brought him out wrapped in a blanket, explaining he had been lethargic all morning. Belinda took her sleeping son and left the daycare. At some point, Belinda managed to reach David, who left Hastings around noon to meet her at their house. A post-it note later found on the kitchen counter recorded that Evan received 1.5 teaspoons of Motrin at 12:15 p.m. Belinda returned to Katy High just after 1 p.m. At 2:30 p.m., after her last student departed, she walked out with Debbie, leaving detailed instructions in case the baby arrived that night. On her way to the parent conference, she encountered Stacy Nisley again. When asked about Evan, Belinda appeared frustrated and said, "David's home. I'll tell you about it later," ending with an exasperated "men." The parent conference with Administrator Margaret Christian proceeded smoothly and concluded around 3:20 p.m., with the women briefly sharing childbirth stories. Belinda left the meeting in a rush, and a security guard noticed her struggling to carry her purse, keys, and new baby pillows, offering assistance. She appeared exhausted and was dragging, but explained once again that she was saving her sick days for when Aaron was born. According to David's father, Ken Temple, Belinda then drove to his and Maureen's house to collect the promised soup. Ken stated they spoke briefly about Evan's condition and the baby's impending arrival before Belinda hurriedly left. At 3:32 p.m., Belinda made a brief 30-second cell phone call to the house on Round Valley Drive. David would later tell investigators she called to inform him she was on her way home, estimating her arrival time as 3:45 p.m. According to David's subsequent statement to Detective Leithner, after Belinda arrived home and was resting, he took Evan to a local park, then to Brookshire Brothers grocery store and Home Depot. At 4:38 p.m., Brenda called the house from Kansas with urgent news. Their grandfather had been critically injured. When no one answered, she left a message. Approximately 45 minutes later, Ken Temple also called to check on Evan's condition, leaving another message when the phone went unanswered. Just before 5:25 p.m., neighbor Angela Vielma was walking on the street adjacent to the Temple house when she observed David's blue truck pulling into the garage. She noticed what appeared to be a young child in the passenger seat, though she didn't see a car seat. As the garage door closed, she heard a truck door open and glimpsed a man's legs. Minutes later, David began pounding frantically on his neighbor Mike Ruggiero's front door, shouting for him to open up. When Ruggiero responded, David thrust Evan toward him and yelled, "Someone has broken into my house! Take Evan!" before turning and sprinting back toward his property. At 5:36 p.m., the first 911 call was placed. David's voice, breaking with emotion, told the operator, "Somebody's broken into my house and my wife has been shot. Oh my God! Oh Jesus!" "Her brain is on the floor. I think she's already dead," he continued, informing the dispatcher that his wife was 8 months pregnant. Dispatcher Shannon Tutuomondo Buell urged him to check if Belinda was breathing, but David insisted, "She's dead." He claimed he had found her in the closet with part of her brain exposed. Throughout the call, David's emotional state fluctuated between sobbing and periods of relative calm. He repeatedly emphasized that the back window was broken and the door was open. When the dispatcher pressed him to attempt CPR to potentially save the baby, David initially agreed but then refused, saying, "I can't. Her head is just gone. There's just no way." At 5:49 p.m., Sergeant Sam Gonsoulin and Deputy Kathleen Johnson arrived at the scene. Neighbor Ruggiero was struggling to prevent the family's aggressive chow, Shaka, from breaking through the backyard gate. The officers prepared to shoot the animal to gain entry when David emerged from the house and, following their commands, secured the dog in the garage. David informed the officers, "My wife's dead." Despite the horrific circumstances, he appeared unusually calm and was not observed shedding tears. Paramedic Maria Megida entered the house and confirmed that both Belinda and her unborn daughter Erin were deceased. She noted that the blood had already begun to congeal, suggesting a significant amount of time had elapsed since the incident occurred. Crime scene investigators Dean Holtke and David Rossi arrived shortly thereafter. Holtke observed that David, who was placed in a squad car, was not crying. An atomic absorption test for gunshot residue was performed on David's hands as part of standard procedure. Homicide detectives Chuck Leithner and Mark Schmidt took control of the investigation. Leithner interviewed Ruggiero about his observations and noted the arrival of Ken and Maureen Temple, who rushed to embrace their son in his moment of apparent grief. Inside the house, detectives encountered a scene that raised immediate questions. Shards of glass from the back door were scattered in a pattern suggesting the door had been open when the window was broken. A television lay on the floor but remained plugged into the wall, and dining room drawers had been pulled open, but their contents appeared undisturbed. Jewelry and other valuables, including David's championship ring, remained in plain sight throughout the house. When crime scene investigator Holtke leaned over Belinda's body and carefully parted her hair, he discovered a gaping, bloody contact wound at the back of her head. This finding definitively ruled out any possibility of suicide and confirmed they were investigating a murder. The weapon used was determined to be a 12-gauge shotgun. The investigation into who had taken the life of Belinda Temple and her unborn daughter was about to begin. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. On the day following the murder, David's demeanor struck investigators as unusual. He appeared calm, with clear eyes, showing no evidence of having shed tears. He quickly retained defense attorney Paul Looney, who immediately advised him against taking a polygraph test. The autopsy on Belinda and Erin was performed on January 12th, confirming that the cause of death was a contact wound to the back of the head from a 12-gauge shotgun, with the manner of death classified as homicide. DNA tests later confirmed David was Erin's father. Detectives began interviewing faculty members at both Hastings and Katy High Schools. Belinda's closest colleagues, Debbie Berger and Cindy O'Brien, revealed that the marriage had been troubled and that Belinda suspected David of having an affair. Detective Tracy Shipley interviewed Belinda's parents, who initially defended their son-in-law. However, when Brenda spoke to Shipley separately, she recounted the marital tension, David's New Year's lie about the hunting trip, and his apparent lack of excitement about the baby girl. On January 13th, while Belinda's co-workers waited outside the Temple house, the men of the family held a private meeting inside. During this gathering, David confessed to his father and brothers that he had been unfaithful to his wife. He later made the same confession to his mother. The investigation took a significant turn when detectives received a tip from an Alief Independent School District officer about David's relationship with Heather Scott. In her initial interview, Heather downplayed the relationship's significance. Her roommate, Tara Hall, also initially withheld information during her first statement. However, Tara later provided a second, more detailed account that proved crucial to the investigation. She revealed that the affair was serious, that David had spent the New Year's holiday with Heather rather than hunting, and most importantly, that 3 days before the murder, David had told Heather he had totally fallen in love with her. The visitation and funeral services for Belinda and Erin took place on January 14th and 15th. At the visitation, Ken Temple told attendees that David didn't own a shotgun. David confessed to Brenda that he hadn't actually been hunting on New Year's Eve, but had attended a party where he kissed a girl. During the funeral service, many observers noted that David appeared unemotional, even whispering and laughing with his brother at the graveside. On January 16th, 3-year-old Evan was interviewed by 2 psychiatrists. The session yielded no indication that the toddler had witnessed his mother's murder. As the investigation expanded, detectives explored alternative suspects. They focused on a teenage neighbor named Joe Sanders, who had been truant from school and had lied about his whereabouts on the day of the murder. Sanders and his friends had access to 12-gauge shotguns and reloaded double-aught buckshot shells similar to the type used in the murder. However, after extensive interviews and polygraph examinations, none of the teenagers' weapons or shells matched the physical evidence. Prosecutors ultimately concluded they were not involved in the crime. Just over a month after the murder, on Valentine's Day, David sent Heather an expensive bouquet of roses. He was subsequently observed picking Evan up from daycare with Heather in his new truck. Tammy Harlan, enraged by this development, began following David and confirmed he was regularly visiting Heather's townhouse. In March 1999, prosecutors presented the case to a grand jury primarily to preserve witness testimony. Key figures, including the Temple family and Heather Scott, testified before the panel. David appeared but invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The grand jury ultimately described the case as weak, and no indictment was issued. Following their briefing by detectives on the evidence, including details of the affair, Tom and Carol Lucas ceased defending David and became convinced of his guilt. This marked a significant shift in family dynamics, creating a divide between the Lucas and Temple families. The Harlans experienced their own troubles when a man was seen running from their home and their alarm sensors were discovered broken. Fearing David might be responsible for the intrusion, they relocated to Fort Worth in the fall of 2000. Before leaving, Quentin provided a second statement to police, now corroborating Tammy's account of the troubled marriage and revealing he had seen a box of shotgun shells when helping David move. Brenda began secretly recording phone conversations with David and Maureen Temple. In these calls, David lied about his actions and claimed Belinda would want them to leave it alone. He became angry when Brenda questioned him directly. Maureen denied the affair and hung up when pressed for details. David's sister-in-law Becky, who had been very close to Belinda, confided to both Tammy and Brenda that she was deathly afraid of David and was beginning to think he did it. The investigation faced several setbacks. A search of David's storage unit in February 2000 failed to locate the shotgun shells Quentin had previously observed. The case was removed from the active homicide board in January 2000, though Detective Mark Schmidt refused to abandon it entirely, continuing to work on it during his spare time. The September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks created massive backlogs at the FBI laboratory, further delaying the analysis of evidence from the Temple case. Tom Lucas grew increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress, pressuring Schmidt and writing to the governor requesting Texas Rangers' involvement, without success. He and Carol found support through the organization Parents of Murdered Children. Meanwhile, David moved forward with his life. He and Heather married on June 9, 2001, though very few of David's fellow coaches attended the wedding. Heather began raising Evan, who called her mom. The Lacey Peterson murder case in late 2002 brought renewed media attention to the Temple case due to striking similarities between the two crimes. In April 2003, the investigation received a major breakthrough. The FBI laboratory issued a report that investigators considered a smoking gun. The analysis found gunshot residue on David's warm-up jacket, shirt, and one of his tennis shoes. The report concluded that the GSR on David's clothing was consistent with the gunshot primer residue on the victim's clothing. By the 5th anniversary of the murder in January 2004, Tom Lucas publicly stated his belief that there was sufficient evidence against a particular suspect. Following the guilty verdict in the Scott Peterson trial in November 2004, Tom Lucas emailed Harris County District Attorney Chuck Rosenthal, threatening to go public with what he viewed as a botched investigation. In response to this pressure, District Attorney Rosenthal assigned the cold case to star prosecutor Kelly Siegler for review. After examining the case files, which now included the crucial FBI gunshot residue report, Siegler consulted with her co-counsel, Craig Goodhart, and determined there was sufficient evidence to proceed with prosecution. On November 29, 2004, nearly 6 years after the murder, Siegler wrote an arrest warrant for David Temple. The following morning, detectives arrested David after he dropped Evan off at school. When informed that the arrest was for Belinda's murder, David appeared stunned and responded dismissively, "You've got to be shitting me. That was like 6 years ago." He was released on $30,000 bond later that day and retained prominent defense attorney Dick Degerin to represent him in the upcoming trial. Following his arrest, David Temple's family replaced his initial attorney with Dick Degerin, widely considered the top criminal defense attorney in Texas. This decision set the stage for what observers would call a clash of the legal titans, as Degerin had a contentious history with lead prosecutor Kelly Siegler. Degerin made what would prove to be a critical strategic error early in the proceedings. He pushed aggressively for an evidentiary hearing to examine the prosecution's case, despite Siegler's warning that this would trigger the district attorney's policy of closing the case file to the defense. Degerin insisted on proceeding, but Siegler then secured a grand jury indictment, which under Texas law negated his right to the hearing. As a result, Degerin lost the opportunity to examine the full evidence against his client. The prosecution faced a significant setback regarding their key forensic evidence. The FBI's original report had found gunshot residue on David's clothing that was consistent with the GSR on Belinda's clothing. However, the FBI later abandoned the specific metallurgy testing used, acknowledging the science was deeply flawed. The original analyst was decertified, and a new analyst, Diana Wright, retested the evidence with weaker results. In a major blow to the prosecution, Judge Douglas Shaver ruled all GSR evidence inadmissible, citing widespread contamination problems at the FBI laboratory. The prosecution had lost its only scientific evidence. 2 weeks before trial, Siegler conducted a mock trial to prepare her detective witnesses for Degerin's aggressive cross-examination style. A police lieutenant played the role of Degerin, identifying potential weaknesses in the case, particularly regarding the alternate suspect, teenage neighbor Joe Sanders. On October 16, 2007, the trial began. The Lucas and Temple families sat on the same courtroom bench, separated by an aisle, but refusing to acknowledge each other's presence. Siegler opened with the theme, "The truth is always in the details." She portrayed David as a controlling man who always demanded his way and possessed a clear motive. He had fallen in love with Heather Scott and wanted to eliminate his perfect wife, whom even his own parents adored. She argued that David had meticulously staged the burglary scene to conceal his crime. Degerin made a stunning opening claim that would define the defense strategy. David and Belinda Temple were deeply in love with each other. David and Belinda Temple were happy in their marriage. Many legal observers considered this a risky tactic that ignored the powerful evidence of the affair. He introduced Joe Sanders as an alternate suspect and played the 911 call, during which David wept openly at the defense table. The prosecution's case began with law enforcement testimony. Detectives testified that the crime scene appeared staged. Dean Holtke demonstrated in court that the back door could not have struck the hutch in the manner Degerin claimed, disproving the defense's theory for the glass pattern. They noted that valuable jewelry belonging to both David and Belinda remained untouched in plain sight, inconsistent with a burglary. Officers described David's demeanor on the night of the murder as calm, unemotional, and uncooperative. Detective Chuck Leithner testified that David never made eye contact with him. Quentin and Tammy Harlan provided damaging testimony about David's treatment of Belinda. Quentin testified that David was verbally abusive, had asked him whether he would leave his own wife for Heather, and when questioned about Belinda's murder, had responded dismissively. "What difference is it going to make? It isn't going to bring Belinda back." He confirmed seeing a box of shotgun shells in David's house during the post-murder move. Tammy delivered emotional testimony about David's cruelty, describing how he called Belinda's family fat rednecks and white trash and ridiculed Belinda's weight. She insisted that Belinda would never have allowed a sick Evan to be taken to a park or ride in a truck without a car seat. When called by the prosecution, Heather Scott Temple proved to be a hostile witness. She argued with Siegler and minimized her relationship with David, describing their intimacy as not memorable. She claimed police had forced her to include David's profession of love in her statement, despite having signed it and repeated it before a grand jury. Heather's former roommate, Tara Hall, directly contradicted this testimony. Hall confirmed that just over a month after the murder, David had sent Heather Valentine's Day flowers, and that spring he was at their townhouse planting flowers, demonstrating the relationship had resumed almost immediately. In a crucial blow to the defense, family friend Clint Stockdick refuted the Temple family's claim that David only owned a 20-gauge shotgun. Stockdick testified that he had hunted with the Temple brothers and that all of them, including David, used 12-gauge shotguns. He also testified they used to reload their own shells, like the one used in the murder. The defense presented the Roberts boys, three brothers who testified that as children they had heard a bang around 4:30 p.m. on the day of the murder, a time when surveillance video proved David was at a grocery store. The Temple family testified collectively that David and Belinda's marriage was happy and that David owned only a 20-gauge shotgun. However, their testimony crumbled under cross-examination. Darren was exposed for lying to the grand jury when he denied knowledge of David's affair. Maureen minimized the affair as a 2-day weekend and denied it had happened, contradicting her son's earlier confession. Becky was confronted with recorded conversations in which she had told Brenda she was deathly afraid of David and believed he was guilty. When David took the stand, he insisted he loved Belinda and characterized his relationship with Heather as merely a casual romantic relationship. He changed key details from his original statement, including the time of Belinda's arrival home. Under cross-examination, he was forced to admit he had lied in recorded conversations with Brenda. He effectively claimed that nearly every prosecution witness, including Heather, the Harlans, and Brenda, was either lying or mistaken, while maintaining that Joe Sanders could have been the killer. In closing arguments, DeGuerin argued there was more evidence against Joe Sanders than David, and that David had been at the grocery store when the Roberts boys reported hearing the gunshot. Siegler delivered a powerful closing statement, declaring that the Temple family had lied to insult the jury's intelligence because that family knows him, because that family knows what happened. She methodically walked through the timeline, the lies, and the staged crime scene, arguing that only David possessed both motive and opportunity. On November 15, 2007, after deliberating for just over 8 hours, the jury returned their verdict: guilty of murder. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. Upon hearing the verdict, David's knees buckled. He looked toward the ceiling, began crying, then mouthed, "Oh shit," as he was led away. His mother, Maureen, collapsed on the courtroom bench. The jury quickly returned with a sentence of life in prison. During victim impact statements, Belinda's brother Brian looked directly at David and delivered words that would resonate long after the trial concluded. "Divorce was an option," he said simply. These 4 words captured the senseless tragedy of what had occurred. Belinda Temple had been a beloved teacher, a devoted mother, and a woman preparing joyfully for the birth of her daughter. She had trusted the man who ultimately took not only her life, but also that of their unborn child, Aaron. Her brother's statement served as a final reminder that there had been alternatives to murder, that the path David Temple chose was not inevitable, but a deliberate act of violence against a woman who had loved him and deserved so much better. The case of Belinda Temple shows how domestic violence can escalate to its most tragic conclusion, and how the pursuit of justice, though sometimes long and difficult, can ultimately prevail. Belinda's memory lives on through those who knew and loved her, and through the recognition that her life, and that of baby Aaron, mattered far more than the selfish desires of the man who destroyed their family.